The meeting to order on Tuesday, March 21st, 2017 of our Yountville Housing Authority, and ask for a roll call, please.
Here. Here.
Here. And if you'd like to.
Record reflect that member Durham and Warren member are excused at the moment and are expected to arrive at time.
Is your microphone on? Now it is. Okay. So please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Move on to the adoption of the Yountville Housing Authority agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
Hit the button.
It's not going to reflect accurately because I didn't.
If you could verbally say that you're making
I would like to make a motion to adopt the agenda.
And I will second.
Okay. And we are waiting for our vote casting screen.
All right. Somewhat. Let's go. Let's move on.
Okay. All in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from our meeting held January 17th, 2017.
Move approval of minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That is also unanimous. Public comment. I believe the only public here is going to be on the agenda, so we'll move ahead to our consent calendar. We have none. Move ahead to our first administrative regular item, affordable housing local preference policy.
Good evening. Tonight you have before you a resolution amending the town's affordable housing local preference policy, and that policy was originally approved in 2005, and it applies to both rental and ownership opportunities to live in the town's affordable housing units. And the policy creates a three-tiered system in which applicants are entered into a lottery and have the opportunity to have their name drawn. Staff proposed an amendment to the policy that would give greater priority to workforce housing and presented that to the Yountville Housing Authority in January of this year. And we received feedback from the authority that there was general support for the changes, but we received direction to tighten that policy up, especially with regards to all other households that seem to open the policy wide open. So the few modifications, or the few important ones before you tonight, are those separate preference categories. A new first one of which is eligible households that have a member who is an employee of the town and or is required for emergency response. And the idea with that category is to encourage those workers who are emergency responders to live in the communities in which they work, consistent with the town's housing element and the existing policy. The second and third priorities are given to those households where a member works or lives in the town. And in an effort to give greater priority to Napa County workers and residents, we've created new fourth and fifth priorities for those workers for those households with a member who works in the county or lives in the county, in order to address the concern that all other households were too loosely addressed. We eliminated them from the preference categories, but included them in the lottery, so they have an opportunity to at least have one opportunity to have their name drawn, and this is in order to be in compliance with fair housing laws. So those are the changes before you tonight, and I'm free to answer any questions should you have them.
Thank you. Questions of the staff report? I have a question. I think I just read the answer in the point number 2 about employment, about the full-time status, or how much percentage of employment would be required. It appears that you say at least under item number 2 on page 5 of the local preference policy, at least part-time. So I'm assuming that's at least 50% time, or do we need to call that out? What's your thought?
We haven't defined it in the ordinance, but the idea is that that is someone who works at least 20, but less than 40 hours per week.
But you don't think that that's something that needs to be called out specifically, so that, I mean, this may be kind of an extreme, but a lifeguard that's working for summer employment would be an employee of the town. I don't know that that's exactly who we're targeting for this type of thing.
I would turn to the town attorney to help with that question.
So we certainly can define part-time to mean a certain number of hours or even a certain number of months of consistent employment. It's not currently defined in here, but either one of those is possible, and with direction, I think we could probably include it now.
In your experience, is that typically called out, or is it left?
Yeah, having restrictions for the duration of employment is often included, and also defining the number of hours. But I agree also with Sandra that less than 40 but more than 20 would be the general requirement. But having a months or a consistency of employment might be useful as well.
Okay, so maybe we talk about that a little bit further. Any other questions of the staff report at this time? Okay. Oh, yes.
My question.
Oh, and I-
Let's go with Councilmember Dorman.
Okay, thank you. So, and just for the record, I had the opportunity to talk with the town attorney today for a number of questions. So some of this is reiteration, but some of it is new. And one thing I clarified with him is that, for example, on your part-time issue, a full-time, for example, tasting room employee would be second place to a part-time town employee. And he said that's correct, that's how the policy worked. And then the other question I had is, when we talk about emergency response, is that emergency response specific to Yountville, or is it countywide or statewide? Is that modified by the Yountville jurisdiction?
I don't
You're
think
looking at each other.
Yeah, I don't think it's expressly limited to the Yountville jurisdiction, but I think that would be the intent of this policy, which would be necessary for emergency services here in the town. But that would include, for example, sheriffs, because they're contracted for that, and also probably broad enough to include also town employees who would act in the case of an emergency under the town's emergency services plan.
Well, one of the pieces, and I don't know if it's a resolution or the policy itself, says that all town employees are deemed necessary in an emergency.
Right.
So I wondered if that was a meaningful carve-out.
That is, I think, Councilmember Dorman, that's correct, especially with the size of our staff. All of our full-time employees are deemed emergency responders, and they have a role and a responsibility in the event of an emergency. What I would say in our organization is the management team and Public Works has the highest preponderance of a response, especially a winter storm season and things like that. But in the event of a more significant event, it also triggers Park and Rec, for example, operating a shelter, things like that. So when you think about it, we have an employee census with employees coming in from Fairfield, Napa, various locations. So it's one of those, how do we help ourselves, and especially on the Public Works field incident with floods and stuff. So it's fairly common approach that a lot of public agencies are using to support. Also, one could argue also in the, when you look at the lower priorities, it also includes education and other public employment. So it's meant to be fairly broad, but try to help that working element that may not be able to afford to live in the community without some prioritization.
Any other questions?
That's all, thank you.
Councilmember Mueller?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So, any other thoughts from the audience on this item right now? No? Seeing none. I would like to see some language in here about the percentage of employment. And I had thought about the duration, if it's once you're an employee, you're eligible for the preference, or if it should be some duration. What typically would be a industry standard duration?
I would
Either of you?
Yeah, I would suggest 6 months, because that would mean in most cases the employee is off probationary period and would be considered a full status employee. That's a fairly standard.
Should that, and Gary, I think what you were getting at is seasonal employees maybe isn't a target that we're also, so would it be 6 continuous months or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, it could be phrased as an average number of hours over the course of 6 continuous or back-to-back months. Yeah.
Does that make sense to you, Sandra? So I would propose that we add that just as a clarifying language.
Would that be 25 hours on average, or 30, or?
Well, it just seems to me it should be at least more than a 50% employee, but that's just my first thought, unless somebody has another idea to that. Any other members of the council have an opinion about that?
I definitely favor a full-time employee because, a lot of part-time employees probably won't be there for emergency reasons. So it seems kind of intuitive to me that it'd be a full-time employee. So if that's not too restrictive, that would be my preference. I mean, could we add full-time employee preferred? Or is that waffling too much?
Yeah, I think that almost creates like a new category
Okay.
in between 1 and 2.
Okay.
Which we can also do.
No, I think simpler is better, so.
I think if you use 25 hours, you would be on that threshold that's going to get generally out of summer seasonal.
Any other thoughts from council on 25-hour minimum for status?
I tend toward limiting it to full-time employees because I think it makes we have such a small amount of affordable housing, and the study cited in our resolution, although old, I think it says like 84% of the people who work here don't or can't live here. And so given that number, I would tend to favor full-time employees all the way around.
If that's the council's druther, perhaps what we could do is currently employed greater than 30 hours a week for a duration of 6 months or more, because that fits into that target of full-time, because anybody that is 30 hours or greater has to be fully benefited and everything. We don't tend to have that level of part-time, but I think that gives you that focus on full-time.
What is it you're trying to include by having a level of part-time status at all, Steve?
I think we were just
somebody might
reflective.
be-
We don't have an issue if you're comfortable with full-time, then that's the council's prerogative. We do have some duration employees that might be eligible, but again, I think the emphasis, it's easy enough to just make it full-time, and then we can review that over time to see if that's something. I don't think we had a strong focus one way or the other on including that. I think we were just trying to be more inclusive.
Councilmember Durham, you ever thought about that?
No, I agree. I think this is good. I don't want this, I don't want it to overshadow the other fact that it still gives opportunity for the people who are living here. And I know we're spending a lot of time on the discussion for emergency responders, and I just want to make the comment, I like the 30 hours because it needs to be someone who's full-time, but I just want to make a comment that it's not to overshadow anybody who's living and who would be working in Yountville as well.
And that's your second priority.
Yeah, it's just your priorities. So good.
And I would say what we've really worked on clarifying this is, in our determination, the prior policy was crafted more towards home ownership, which was why it had language in there talking about those who already rented in the community. And I think when we fast forward to 2017 and we look at who's the target audience, we actually want to try to employ people or house people that are working in Yountville, whether it's for the town or our businesses locally, so that they're not having to make the commute and they can be an integral part of the community. And I think those first two, and then, like I say, everything we've done is also to make sure that it's consistent with fair housing and state law requirements.
Does an employee of the Veterans Home, where do they qualify here?
They reside within the town limits.
So that would be just working in the town.
They would be category B.
Okay. So if any further discussion on this? I think what I am hearing is at least 30 hours a week and potentially 6 months minimum employment, if that's satisfactory to everyone. If it's not, then we need to hear another proposal. But I think we may have talked to the point of being ready for a motion.
I do have one other question. Would it be on a prospective basis, like from the time the ordinance is effective, the employee would have to work 6 months and then go first preference in the lottery?
No, I don't
Or
think
does
that,
it reach back somebody who's already been here for 6 months?
I would,
Yeah, I would say is the second one, because once this policy goes into place, it's at the time the applicant puts in their information if they meet the qualifications under the policy. So once it is in place and a unit comes up, when they apply, if they have been working on average for 30 hours a week for at least 6 months, they would be eligible to apply.
And that's certainly the intent that I would want to have on that. So is there a motion on the modified policy?
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 17-3393 with the,
Under the Housing Authority item, this is, the item is actually direction to town council to approve. And
Yeah, I was
then
wondering
under
about
the
that.
council meeting, you guys will be taking action
all
on.
right,
Okay.
can I make a motion that we send this to the town council for further
For
discussion and
consideration?
approval?
And that's already on our agenda for the next meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So there's that motion. Is there a second for that motion?
I second.
Push the button.
No.
No, I tried to push the
Okay,
button, but it
that's
didn't
fine.
work,
And
so,
I tried, I'm
anyway.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous, 4 votes yes. Okay, moving on to item 8B, the status of the residents at 27 Landy Way.
Yes. So I think most of you will recall that we exercised an option to purchase this unit last fall. That closed on January 5th, and the town is now the fee owner of this property. With the previous owner, there were deed restrictions in place that kept the unit affordable and allowed the town to purchase it back at affordable prices. At the January 19th or 17th meeting, we had discussion and received direction from the council on possible buyers of the property and what the terms of that sale would be. The major points of that sale include a sale price of $296,300, deed restrictions to ensure that the unit is leased to affordable households, an option to purchase back so the town can sell it if the buyer no longer wants to rent it to eligible households or no longer wants to be the owner of it. The town would have the option to become the owner once again, and a loan of $60,000 towards the down payment for the loan that the seller would put up for the total price. So the 4 documents before you effectuate those terms and the sale. These have been negotiated with Napa Valley Community Housing and their attorney. They include a purchase and sale agreement, which is the basic agreement that allows the property to enter into escrow and for the buyer to inspect. And then there's also a deed of trust and a promissory note. The promissory note is for the $60,000 loan, and the deed of trust secures the house against it in the case of default. And then there's the lease restriction and option to purchase agreement, which is what ensures that the unit maintains its character as affordable and is only leased to eligible households. And that actually puts the deed restrictions in place for 50 years going forward, so that will be in place for a long time. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the 4 agreements and how they work together. I know there's a lot of information in there.
and just if I could, Kathleen Dreesen, Executive Director of Napa Valley Community Housing, is in the audience if there's any questions related to the transaction on her part.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Mueller?
I have a couple questions. I know you think 50 years is a long time. I also think 50 years is a long time. But we do have some rentals already in town that go into perpetuity. Is there any reason that we couldn't consider that?
So having a deed restriction that goes on forever does run against some real property principles, and it does make it subject to a challenge under what's called the rule against perpetuities. And it essentially means that you can't restrict the future use of property indefinitely forever. And so having some limit on it does protect against that challenge. And so what I've seen is typical is something around 30 years. We negotiated up to 50 with Napa Valley Community Housing.
And then another question that, since that we're talking about this specific property, is this ultra low, low, moderate?
So this would currently no more than the median household income for the county as a whole, but it
Okay.
would need to be marketed in accordance with the policy that was just being considered.
Right.
Which would allow priorities under the Yountville Municipal Code for low, very low, and moderate. So there's a lot of working parts here.
So this sounds like it's moderate.
So that would be the cap, but it can be marketed to folks below that as well.
Oh, okay, but somebody who is moderate in the medium definition could apply,
Which I
as well
believe-
as
Yes,
people below that. So that's all based on lottery?
yes, under the policy.
Okay, so depending on their income, then that's what establishes which category it's in. Okay, thanks.
And I believe the median household income in the county is approximately $74,000. So that would be the cap.
That's my questions.
Councilmember Dorman?
Thank you. I think this is probably a question for our town manager. I saw in the resolution that $125,000 is returned to the budget contingency fund, and I'm assuming that is because that's from whence it came.
That is correct. If you may recall, because this was an unanticipated purchase, for the first time during my tenure, we actually used the contingency fund on the interim. Now that to borrow or to make the purchase, now that we're still concluding within the fiscal year, this will be able to restore that. And then the $60,000 loan will be coming from the Housing Opportunity Fund, which we anticipate will have more than significant revenue once a few planned projects. So yes, that's exactly correct, that the finance director will be happy and then the contingency gets restored.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Durham?
I was just wondering, what was the cost to buy this back and to do this? What was the cost to Yountville, this town?
I believe we purchased it back from the previous owner, Mr. David LaMonica, for approximately the same price that it's now being purchased for, right around within 1,000 or so, I believe. So it's, I think, some overhead for producing the documents, but it's mostly the same in and out, given that minus the $60,000 loan, which will be repaid at $200 a month.
And I would also point out, I think that's a very correct statement, the town has absorbed most of the transaction costs and staff time to support this goal, because otherwise we don't really have a source for this.
Very good. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, would you like to comment on this item? And you came all this way. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Dreesen, Executive Director for Napa Valley Community Housing. We're celebrating our 40th year this year, and we've worked very well with the town of Yountville in the past. We've really appreciated their willingness to go the extra mile, as Steve was pointing out about, absorbing some of the fees and so forth to make sure that affordable housing is available for everyone who lives and works here. So we appreciate and salute your future looking for doing that. Any other questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I have
Yes. Councilmember Durham.
You're running Aurora Grande
Yes,
here in town
we
as
are,
well?
yes.
Excellent. I had some people ask yesterday, and so I just wanted to be clear on that. Excellent.
Yes,
Good.
we are. And we've got a few others as well. We have Mount and Yount.
Perfect. Good. Excellent.
I don't see any other questions right
Okay.
now. We'll save them for
Thank you, Mayor.
the next meeting.
All right, great.
Tonight.
Okay,
Thank
bye-bye.
you. Seeing no other members of the public, is there a motion to be had on this item? Or is there further discussion? How about a motion from somebody? Do we have a button pushed?
And we're
Let's
working
remember to
on
do,
that.
just
verbal.
mention verbally when you push a motion or a second, please.
Jeff is not going to be able to.
Is it?
So I'll let someone else do it then.
So who did,
Okay, I pushed the button and it actually turned red, so we're good.
so you made the motion,
Looks that way.
and then Councilmember Dorman made the
And I will second.
Thank you.
Give you some options here.
Okay, so three of us will vote online. You just need a verbal from Councilmember Durham.
I'm going to change it.
Go ahead and vote, please.
Good.
And then we'll just wonder what Jeff's
No,
going
we
to
won't wonder.
Okay, so that passes unanimously 4-0. So that is that there is a recommendation to the council that will be discussed at our subsequent meeting right after this one. Very good. Thank you. Do we have any other business of the Yountville Housing Authority? I see no other. So with that, we'll adjourn to our next regular meeting sometime in the distant future. And thank you very much. We'll adjourn from this, and at 6 o'clock in about 19 minutes, we will be reconvening as the town council. Thank you.